Commander Zextal stood on the bridge of his warship and looked down at the blue planet below. Earth looked small and weak from space. His sensors showed cities filled with primitive creatures who barely knew how to travel between stars. Humans used metal bullets and simple explosives. Their ships were made of welded steel plates. Their armies moved like ancient warriors from a forgotten age. The galactic hegemony had conquered 47 worlds in the past century. Earth would be number 48. The invasion plan was simple. Drop soldiers into major population centers. Destroy their communication networks. Wait for surrender. Most species gave up after losing their capital cities. The smart ones surrendered before the first shot was fired. Zextal had read the intelligence reports 3 times. Humans were bipedal mammals who lived roughly 100 of their years. They fought wars among themselves constantly, but had never faced a real galactic threat. Their weapons could barely penetrate hegemony armor. Their fastest ships moved at a fraction of light speed. They had discovered nuclear fusion only recently. The first dropships launched at dawn. Silver teardrops fell through Earth's atmosphere like rain. Each ship carried 50 hegemony soldiers, equipped with energy weapons and battle armor that could stop any human projectile. The plan was to capture Phoenix first, then move on to other major cities. Humans would see their defenses crumble and accept the inevitable. Lieutenant Jake Morrison crouched behind a concrete barrier in downtown Phoenix. His rifle felt heavy in his hands. The scope showed alien ships landing 6 blocks away. Creatures stepped out that were taller than any human. Their armor looked like it grew from their skin. Their weapons hummed with blue energy that made the air smell like burnt metal. Jake's unit was part of the 82nd Airborne Division. Charlie Company had been fighting for 3 weeks since the aliens first arrived. Every day brought new horror. Energy beams that could cut through tank armor, flying machines that moved faster than fighter jets, soldiers who seemed to feel no fear and took wounds that would kill a human. The radio crackled in Jake's ear. Captain Lisa Grant was coordinating the defense from a bombed-out office building 4 blocks east. Her voice was calm despite the chaos around them. She had been a school principal before the invasion. Now she commanded 200 soldiers, who were all that stood between the aliens and the civilian evacuation routes. Charlie 6 to all units. Grant's voice came through static. Enemy movement detected on 5th Street. They're moving in formation toward the bridge. Pattern Delta. I repeat, Pattern Delta. Jake knew Pattern Delta. It meant retreat while fighting. Draw the aliens into prepared positions. Use their buildings and rubble as weapons. Make every block cost them blood. The aliens fought like they did. Were on parade. Perfect lines. Coordinated movements. They advanced like they expected humans to break and run. Zexal watched the battle through his tactical display. Each soldier wore a helmet camera that sent images back to the command ship. The humans fought with desperation, but also with surprising coordination. They used their primitive explosives cleverly. They turned their own buildings into traps. They seemed to know exactly where his soldiers would advance. The hegemony had fought dozens of species. Most collapsed when their command structures were destroyed. Others fought bravely, but followed predictable military doctrine. Humans seemed different. They adapted quickly, used unconventional tactics. They fought from sewers and rooftops. In abandoned subway tunnels, Sergeant Ben Carter led his squad through the ruins of a shopping mall. They had been tracking an alien patrol for 2 hours. The creatures moved methodically, checking each building for human fighters. Carter's men waited in ambush positions with homemade explosives and stolen alien weapons. The first alien scout rounded the corner at exactly 1400 hours. Carter opened fire with a captured energy rifle. The beam punched through the creatures. Chest armor, but it kept fighting. It raised its weapon and returned fire even as blue blood poured from the wound. The alien fought for another 20 minutes before finally collapsing. Carter stared at the dying creature. It was trying to speak into a communication device, warning its comrades about human positions. Even with fatal wounds, it was still fighting. Carter had seen human soldiers do the same thing. Die hard and take enemies with them. A day had never expected aliens to show the same stubborn refusal to quit. Memetic Amy Rodriguez crawled forward during a brief pause in the fighting. The alien was badly wounded, but still alive. Its breathing was labored and strange. Rodriguez had studied alien anatomy from captured bodies. She knew where their vital organs were located. This one was dying slowly. Rodriguez opened her medical kit. The alien's eyes tracked her movements. It said something in its own language. The universal translator on her belt gave a rough meaning. "Why do you approach? I am your enemy." Rodriguez began treating the alien's wounds with human medical supplies. She had no idea if the medications would help or harm the creature. Leaving any wounded being to suffer went against everything she believed. The alien watched her work with what might have been confusion. Zextal observed this interaction through his soldier's helmet camera. He had seen many species in combat. Some fought with honor. Others used deception and trickery. But he had never witnessed a warrior species that would treat enemy wounded during active combat. It made no tactical sense. It wasted valuable medical supplies. It exposed the medic to enemy fire. The human female worked for 15 minutes to stabilize his dying soldier. She used primitive but effective techniques to stop the bleeding. She injected medicines that seemed to ease the creature's pain. Then she moved back to her own fighting position and resumed shooting at other hegemony forces. Zexal replayed the recording several times. His military advisors were equally puzzled. In hegemony culture, wounded enemies were either killed quickly or left to die. Showing mercy to an opponent was seen as weakness. But this human had risked her life to help a dying alien soldier, then immediately returned to trying to kill his comrades. The battle for Phoenix lasted 18 days. Hegemony forces eventually secured the city center, but humans continued fighting from the suburbs and underground tunnels. Every building they captured was booby-trapped. Every street was a potential ambush site. The humans retreated but never surrendered. When the fighting finally stopped, Zextal counted his losses. 40% casualties to capture one medium-sized human city. His soldiers reported strange dreams and difficulty sleeping. Some refused to enter buildings that might contain human civilians. Others had begun questioning orders for the first time in their military careers. The intelligence reports had been wrong about humans. These creatures fought like cornered predators. They showed mercy to enemies while simultaneously developing more efficient ways to kill them. They treated war like a science and an art form. They were learning hegemony tactics faster than his own soldiers could adapt to human unpredictability. Zextal prepared his first report to High Command. Earth would not be conquered in days or weeks. It might not be conquered at all. Humans were unlike any species the hegemony had ever encountered. They were primitive in technology, but advanced in the psychology of warfare. They understood something about fighting that his people had never learned. The invasion of Earth had only just begun, but Zextal already suspected it would end differently than anyone expected. 2 months after the first landing, Zexal realized the invasion was not going as planned. Phoenix had fallen, but humans still fought from every suburb and underground tunnel. They had moved their command centers into subway systems and natural caves. Every sewer became a place where aliens might be attacked. Every basement held weapons and supplies. The humans were not fighting a normal war. In every other conquest, civilian populations would flee to safety zones or surrender to superior forces. Human civilians instead formed fighting groups that attacked supply lines and communication posts. Medical facilities became places where explosives were made. Schools were turned into sniper positions. Private Danny Walsh had been a chemistry teacher at Roosevelt High School before the aliens came. Now he worked in the basement of his former classroom, mixing chemicals that could burn through alien armor. The building's gymnasium had become a training center where he taught other humans how to make explosive devices from common household items. Danny's improvised weapons were crude but effective. He had discovered that alien whole metal was strong but not impossible to destroy. Human thermite could burn through most hegemony materials if applied correctly. His students learned to build delayed action bombs using simple timers and radio triggers. The aliens had superior technology, but humans understood chemistry and physics just as well. They knew how metals melted and which chemicals created the hottest fires. They learned to use their enemy's own power cells as weapons by overloading the energy storage systems until they exploded. Colonel Rick Hayes commanded what remained of Earth's organized military from a network of connected bunkers beneath Chicago. The aliens had destroyed most major cities from orbit, but humans had simply moved underground. They continued fighting from subway systems, abandoned mines, and hastily dug tunnel networks that connected for hundreds of miles. Hayes coordinated resistance cells across 3 states using communication equipment salvaged from destroyed military bases. Headquarters looked like a combination of command center and repair shop. Soldiers worked alongside civilian engineers to modify captured alien technology for human use. The underground war was unlike anything the hegemony had prepared. For their sensors could detect large human forces moving above ground, but small teams operating in subway tunnels were nearly invisible. Humans would emerge from manholes to attack alien patrols, then disappear back underground before reinforcements could arrive. Zextal found himself struggling to understand human military thinking. His own species fought with clear rules and defined objectives. Battles had beginning and ending points. Victory was achieved when enemy forces surrendered or were destroyed. Humans seemed to view warfare as something that never truly ended. Human fighters moved with broken bones and infected wounds. They continued operations even when supplies ran low. They used their own dead as psychological weapons, leaving booby-trapped bodies for alien patrols to discover. They fought as if survival itself depended on never giving up. Dr. Helen Brooks ran a hidden medical facility in the basement of a destroyed hospital. She treated both human resistance fighters and the occasional alien prisoner that human forces managed to capture alive. Her work had revealed important differences between human and alien psychology during combat stress. Brooks had discovered that aliens felt physical pain, much like humans did, but their mental responses were completely different. When human soldiers were wounded, they often became more dangerous and unpredictable. Injured humans would fight harder, take greater risks, and use more desperate tactics. Wounded aliens became confused, disoriented when separated from their command structure. The alien prisoners she treated showed signs of what human psychologists called trauma responses. They had difficulty sleeping. They jumped at sudden noises. Some refused to eat for days at a time. Concepts seemed foreign to their culture. Hegemony soldiers were trained to follow orders without question, but they were not prepared for the psychological pressure of fighting an enemy that refused to follow conventional military rules. The turning point came during what humans called the Battle of Denver. Zextal had received intelligence suggesting that a small human resistance cell was operating from the city ruins. Orbital surveillance showed maybe 200 fighters using the downtown area as a base. Standard procedure called for a quick assault with overwhelming force. Zextal committed an entire division to the operation. 5,000 hegemony soldiers dropped into Denver, expecting to face minimal resistance. Instead, they walked into the largest trap humans had ever constructed. The entire city had been turned into a weapon. Every building was rigged with explosives. Every street was a kill zone with hidden firing positions. The humans had spent weeks preparing ambush sites and escape routes. They had evacuated there civilians through underground passages, while leaving behind volunteer fighters who had no intention of retreating alive. The battle lasted 6 days. Hegemony forces advanced block by block through a city that fought back like a living thing. Buildings collapsed on command to crush alien vehicles. Hidden speakers played recordings of human voices to confuse alien audio sensors. Smoke and fire made it impossible for alien aircraft to provide effective support. Captain Tony Martinez led the human forces defending the city center. He had been a police officer before the invasion and understood urban combat better than most military personnel. His tactical knowledge proved invaluable in turning Denver's infrastructure into a defensive network. Martinez's fighters used the city's electrical grid to power improvised weapons. They redirected water mains to flood alien positions. They used construction equipment to create mobile barriers and firing positions. Every human defender knew the city layout better than any alien could learn from orbital maps. The aliens won the Battle of Denver, but the victory felt more like a defeat. Zexal lost 30% of his assault force, capturing a city that humans had already decided to abandon. The human defenders had inflicted maximum casualties while achieving their real objective of buying time for civilian evacuations in other regions. More disturbing than the casualty numbers was the effect on alien morale. Hegemony soldiers began showing reluctance to enter human-occupied buildings. Some requested reassignment to other theaters of operation. Others developed what human doctors would recognize as anxiety disorders related to combat stress. Zexal reviewed battle recordings from Denver and saw things that challenged his understanding of warfare. Human fighters had used suicide tactics not from desperation, but as calculated military strategy. They had sacrificed themselves to destroy key alien equipment or block critical passageways. But they had also shown mercy to wounded alien prisoners, even while the battle raged around them. The contradiction troubled Zexal deeply. How could a species be so ruthlessly efficient at killing while simultaneously maintaining compassion for their enemies? Human fighters would execute complex ambushes that killed dozens of aliens, then risked their lives to provide medical aid to the survivors. After Denver, Zexal began receiving reports from other commanders across the planet. The pattern was consistent everywhere. Humans fought with a combination of tactical intelligence and emotional intensity that made them uniquely dangerous opponents. They had turned warfare into both an art and a science while never losing their capacity for mercy. The invasion was supposed to be over in weeks. Now, Zexal realized it might take years to subdue Earth, if such a thing was even possible. Humans were not a primitive species waiting to be conquered. They were apex predators who had spent their entire history learning how to fight and survive against impossible odds. 6 months into the invasion, Zexal had lost 60% of his original force. The humans had done something impossible. They had learned to use alien technology faster than his own engineers could develop countermeasures. Crashed alien ships became sources of weapons and armor for human fighters. Captured power cells were turned into massive bombs. Even alien communication systems had been hacked using modified human computer programs. The worst part was that humans had developed tactics that broke every rule of civilized warfare. They used their own wounded as bait, knowing that alien medics would try to help injured enemies. They poisoned water supplies with biological agents designed to target alien body chemistry. They used psychological warfare techniques that left captured aliens unable to speak or move. Staff Sergeant Kevin Miller specialized in alien technology recovery. His team had become expert at stripping useful parts from destroyed enemy vehicles, often while under heavy fire. They had learned which alien components could be safely removed and which ones would explode if handled incorrectly. Their workshop looked like a combination of repair garage and weapons laboratory. Miller's team had discovered that alien power cells could be overloaded in specific ways to create controlled explosions. The energy release was 10 times more powerful than human explosives of the same size. They had also learned to modify alien energy weapons to work with human electrical systems, creating hybrid weapons that combined the best of both technologies. The humans had reverse-engineered alien armor plating and learned to forge crude copies using earth metals and alien manufacturing techniques. Human soldiers now wore protection that could stop most alien energy weapons while remaining light enough for extended combat operations. They looked like medieval knights, wearing armor made from pieces of crashed spaceships. Human innovation terrified Zexal more than their fighting spirit. His species had spent centuries developing their military technology through careful research and testing. Humans took captured equipment and improved it within weeks, using trial and error methods that should have resulted in countless accidents and failures. Major Patricia Lewis commanded what humans called ghost fighters. These were soldiers who operated behind alien lines for months at a time. They lived off scavenged supplies and used captured alien equipment exclusively. They conducted sabotage operations that crippled hegemony supply networks across entire continents. Lewis herself had survived for 4 months. an alien-controlled territory by eating processed alien emergency rations. Human nutritionists had determined that alien food was safe for human consumption, though it tasted terrible and lacked many vitamins humans needed. Her team supplemented their diet with local plants and whatever human food they could find in abandoned stores. The Ghost Fighters had developed a reputation among alien forces that bordered on supernatural fear. They appeared without warning to destroy supply convoys or communication installations, then vanished back into the wilderness. Alien patrols began refusing orders to investigate suspected ghost fighter activity. Zexthel watched his subordinates develop symptoms that human doctors would recognize as trauma responses. Alien soldiers began refusing direct orders for the first time in hegemony military history. Some experienced what appeared to be panic attacks when entering human-occupied areas. Others attempted to surrender to human forces, even though surrender was not recognized in hegemony military culture. The concept of psychological warfare was foreign to alien thinking. Hegemony forces were trained to follow orders regardless of personal feelings or fear. But humans seemed to understand that the mind was as important a battlefield as any physical location. They used terror and confusion as weapons just as effectively as bullets and bombs. The breaking point for many alien soldiers came during attacks on human refugee convoys. Standard hegemony procedure called for quick elimination of civilian populations to prevent future resistance. But human civilians fought back with improvised weapons and desperate courage that shattered alien expectations about non-military targets. During one attack on an evacuation convoy outside Las Vegas, Zexthel watched his soldiers encounter something they had never seen before. Human parents threw themselves at alien soldiers, using their own bodies as shields to protect their children. Elderly humans formed human barriers, absorbing energy weapon fire to allow others to reach cover. Children as young as 10 years old picked up rocks and bottles to throw at alien soldiers. Pregnant women helped carry ammunition to human fighters. Even humans who were clearly dying from wounds continued to help others escape rather than seeking medical aid for themselves. The alien soldiers were trained to kill efficiently and without emotion. But watching human parents sacrifice themselves for their offspring created confusion and hesitation that had never existed in hegemony forces before. Some aliens began refusing orders to fire on civilian targets. Others developed what human psychologists would call moral injury from participating in attacks on families. Dr. Susan Clark worked with human veterans who suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. She had documented how prolonged exposure to violence affected human brain chemistry, but also how humans could recover and return to peaceful civilian life with proper treatment. Her research revealed something important about human psychology that aliens did not understand. Humans recognized that warfare changed the people who fought it. They built systems to preserve the mental health of their warriors, while simultaneously creating some of the most brutal and effective combat techniques the galaxy had ever seen. They understood that soldiers needed psychological support to remain functional over long periods of combat. The alien military had no equivalent concept. Hegemony soldiers were either functional or they were discarded. There was no medical treatment for psychological wounds because such wounds were not supposed to exist. Alien culture viewed mental trauma as a form of weakness that should be eliminated through better training and discipline. Clark's research facilities treated both human and alien soldiers suffering from combat stress. She had learned that aliens experienced trauma responses very similar to humans. Their culture provided no framework for understanding or treating these conditions. Alien prisoners often improved dramatically when given the same psychological care that human veterans received. The revelation that changed everything came from an intercepted human transmission. Stalisla listened to a communication between two human commanders discussing casualty reports. They spoke of acceptable losses and strategic sacrifices. They discussed the mathematical necessity of death in warfare with the same calm professionalism that alien commanders used. But then one commander mentioned something that made no sense to alien thinking. They were rotating veteran fighters away from the front lines not because they were wounded or ineffective, but because prolonged combat was damaging their psychological well-being. The humans were deliberately removing their most experienced soldiers from battle to preserve their mental health. Captain Tony Martinez has been pulled from active duty after 18 months of continuous fighting, instead of being discarded or forced to continue fighting until he broke down completely. The human military recognized that he needed psychological treatment to remain functional. Martinez now spent his time training new recruits, passing on hard-won knowledge about alien tactics and weaknesses. This concept was revolutionary to Zexthal. Humans understood that their soldiers were not just weapons to be used until they broke. They were valuable individuals whose skills and knowledge needed to be preserved. They built military systems that could maintain fighting effectiveness, while also protecting the people who did the fighting. The human approach to warfare was more sophisticated than anything in hegemony doctrine. It could be ruthlessly efficient, killers and compassionate healers, sometimes within the same individual. They fought wars that were both strategically brilliant and emotionally devastating, then developed ways to help their fighters recover from the experience. The moment that destroyed Zexal's understanding of warfare came during the capture of a human field hospital. His forces had surrounded the medical facility for 3 days, expecting the humans inside to surrender once their supplies ran low. Instead, the medical staff continued operating on wounded soldiers, while energy beams flew overhead and explosions shook the building. When alien soldiers finally breached the hospital walls, they found something that violated every principle of military logic. Human doctors and nurses were treating alien wounded alongside their own casualties. Enemy soldiers who had been trying to kill humans hours earlier were receiving blood transfusions and surgical care from the same people they had been fighting. Dr. George Turner was the chief medical officer at the facility. When Zexthal demanded an explanation for this apparent madness, Turner simply stated that healing was part of human nature, even during war. He had taken an oath to preserve life regardless of species or allegiance. To him, a wounded alien soldier was just another patient who needed medical care. Zexthal watched human medical personnel risk their lives to save enemy fighters using precious supplies that could have been used on human casualties. They performed surgery on alien soldiers while their own wounded waited for treatment. They used their limited pain medication on enemy prisoners who were suffering from combat injuries. The contradiction was impossible for alien minds to process. These same humans who had developed the most brutal and effective combat techniques in galactic history were also capable of treating their enemies with compassion that bordered on self-destruction. They could kill with ruthless efficiency, then immediately switch to preserving the lives of the same enemies they had been trying to destroy. Turner showed Zexthal through the hospital wards where human and alien patients lay side by side, receiving identical care. Human nurses checked on alien vital signs with the same attention they gave to wounded human soldiers. Physical therapists helped injured aliens regain mobility using the same techniques they used for human rehabilitation. The alien commander learned that this was not an isolated incident. Throughout the war, human medical facilities had been treating captured alien soldiers as patients rather than prisoners. They provided the same quality of care to enemies that they gave to their own fighters. Many alien soldiers had been returned to hegemony forces after being healed by human doctors. Zexthal interviewed several alien soldiers who had been treated in human medical facilities, reported being confused and frightened when first captured, expecting torture or execution. Instead, they received professional medical care that was often better than what they would have gotten from their own military medical corps. One alien soldier had been blinded by shrapnel from a human explosive device. Human surgeons had spent 12 hours performing delicate eye surgery to restore his vision. They used their most advanced medical equipment and rarest surgical supplies to help an enemy soldier see again. The alien could not understand why enemies would work so hard to heal someone who would return to fighting against them. Another alien soldier had lost a limb during urban combat in Detroit. Human doctors had fitted him with a prosthetic device that was more advanced than anything in hegemony medical technology. They had spent weeks teaching him how to use the artificial limb and provided physical therapy until he could walk normally. Again, these stories revealed something about human psychology that completely baffled alien thinking. Humans could separate the act of fighting from the act of healing. They could be enemies on the battlefield and caregivers in the hospital without seeing any contradiction. They fought wars while maintaining their fundamental respect for life itself. The final revelation came when Zextal discovered human psychological treatment programs for alien prisoners of war. Dr. Susan Clark had expanded her trauma treatment research to include captured alien soldiers who showed signs of combat stress. She was using the same therapeutic techniques on enemy fighters that she used to help human veterans recover from warfare. Clark explained to Zexal that psychological wounds were just as real as physical injuries. She had observed that many alien prisoners suffered from what humans called post-traumatic stress disorder after experiencing prolonged combat against human forces. Her treatment programs helped these aliens process their trauma and regain mental stability. The concept was revolutionary to alien understanding. Hegemony culture viewed mental trauma as weakness that should be eliminated through discipline and training. But humans treated psychological wounds as medical conditions that required professional care and patience to heal. They provided therapy to enemy soldiers not as a form of warfare, but as an extension of their medical obligations. Zextal realized that humans understood something about the nature of conflict that his species had never grasped. They recognized that warfare was not just about victory and defeat, but about preserving the humanity of everyone involved in the fighting. They fought with maximum effectiveness while maintaining their core values of compassion and healing. The alien commander began experiencing what humans would recognize as a nervous breakdown. He found himself unable to sleep, haunted by images of human civilians throwing themselves at his soldiers to protect their children. He developed tremors when giving orders for attacks on human positions, began questioning fundamental assumptions about warfare that he had held his entire military career. Zexal transmitted his final report to Hegemony High Command with hands that shook as he operated the communication equipment. His report contained a recommendation that no military commander had ever made in Hegemony history. He advised immediate withdrawal from Earth and classification of humans as a species too dangerous to engage in warfare. Humans were not primitive creatures waiting to be conquered, he wrote. They were apex predators who had turned warfare into both an art form and a science, while never losing their capacity for mercy. They could design weapon systems that killed with perfect efficiency, then immediately used those same technical skills to develop medical equipment that saved lives. With equal precision, the most terrifying aspect of human warfare was not their tactical brilliance or technological adaptability. It was their ability to maintain their moral center while fighting for survival. They could commit acts of incredible violence while preserving their fundamental humanity. They were capable of both supreme cruelty and unlimited compassion. Often, within the same individual, the invasion was called off within days of Zexal's report reaching the capital. Hegemony High Command established a quarantine zone around Earth's solar system and classified humanity as a Level 9 threat species. No hegemony forces would be permitted to enter human space without explicit authorization from the highest levels of government. Zextal requested reassignment to a peaceful research station where he spent his remaining service, years studying xenopsychology and trying to understand how a species could be simultaneously capable of horror and heroism. He never fully recovered from his experience fighting humans and eventually retired from military service to become a civilian researcher. The human survivors rebuilt their world with the knowledge that they were not alone in the universe. They kept their weapons ready and their defenses strong, but they also maintained their hospitals and their commitment to healing. They had learned that the galaxy contained other intelligent species, and they hoped that future contact would be peaceful. But if other aliens came to Earth seeking conquest, they would find humanity prepared for war while still hoping for peace. The next species that challenged humans would face opponents who understood that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the capacity to heal even while fighting for survival.